And welcome to IndiNations, 7 Generations Investing. I'm Jeremy Bryan, and this is powered by IndiWealth. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about land back acquisitions and what I'm calling forward thinking on land back. So really, this is about setting up the infrastructure to make these land back agreements more sustainable and prosperous over a longer period of time. It is fantastic that this is happening, that this is occurring, that Native tribal organizations and Native governments are acquiring lands that were originally theirs and able to use it to enhance the prosperity of their people. This is excellent. But without a sustainable infrastructure, it can be a little bit more of a pain than a prosperity. So that's what we're going to look at today, is just how to set up that infrastructure in the proper manner. So let's get started. So as I said before, the land back agreements are accelerating. I won't go through individuals, but there's plenty of tribal organizations out there. You can find them on Google. You can find them on Wikipedia that have shown that have had land back agreements recently. And it's really across the United States as they're recovering ancestral lands through multiple pathways. The first one being federal return of government land or state return of government land. So through the government, they protract the land back to the nations that originally owned them in the first place. There's also conservation elements. There's non-government partnerships and private donations that are really working toward this as an initiative and expanding that access back to gathering land back for tribal organizations and reservations and expanding those types of things and for the community. And lastly, this is happening more as well, is that direct purchase. Because of the economic development of certain tribal organizations, they have the ability to purchase land back and to utilize those assets to, again, enhance their community profile over a longer period of time. And there can be a lot of different mechanisms and uses for this land. It doesn't have to be for one particular thing. It may never be economically viable. That's absolutely fine. You just need to know what the mission is at the outset for why, when you have the chance to procure this land, what is the best use and avenue? And often a tribal council will be the determining factor of that. So the point of land back is obviously not only recovery, and I think it's unique to every tribal organization. I don't think that this is a specific thing that can be pointed to and say, this is the only path and this is the right path, because there's a lot of different paths for using land back once it's recovered. I think sovereignty and self-determination is obviously the top one. Enhancing your sovereignty. You are an independent nation. You should be able to govern on your own. You have tribal law that suggests that you can do that very thing. And this land back acquisition can allow you to enhance that sovereignty and self-determination over a longer period of time. Cultural revitalization. Again, this doesn't have to be the goal of pure economy, right? Is that a lot of times that's a great use of the land, but there's a lot of times where it's just cultural revitalization, where you want to bring this land back to enhance what your community wants from you all. So that is absolutely a viable strategy as well. Climate and ecological resilience, that comes from, again, stewards of the land, is that we have generations and generations of Native communities that have treated the land with respect and brought forth, cultivation and things that they've done that really have been resilient for the land over a longer period of time. And sometimes the reacquisition of that can reinstill some of those practices to make it more resilient for the next generation and future generations to come. And lastly, and the one I'll concentrate on most, I'm a finance guy. At the end of the day, this is what I do, is finance and investing. So I'll talk about mostly the economic opportunity here, much more from the investing side and how to prepare for it. I'm not going to tell you what to do with regard to what to put on your land. What are the best businesses to put on those things? Those are conversations we can absolutely have, but this is more to set up the infrastructure so that you can create economic opportunity over a longer period of time. Because without that infrastructure, a lot of the decisions are made ad hoc and can be very difficult to implement on a sustainable basis over a longer period. So from a land back perspective, acquisition is literally only the beginning. I think, on the left hand side, it says here recovering the land is a political and legal achievement. Absolutely should be celebrated. Reestablishing land for your community is absolutely a win. But that is a political and legal win and a win for the community. That's absolutely fine. But turning the land into generational prosperity, that's the financial side. That's a financial mission. And so when you require or acquire land, what is its best use? If you're going for economic opportunity, as I stated before, that transitions from a political and legal achievement to now a financial mission. Now you need to do the work to get that going forward. And that component of the work is rarely funded at the outset. So, this is something that a tribal organization has to put together to build the infrastructure to realize the economic opportunity of that land. And so, just what are some of those initial costs that come from reacquisition of land? Title and trust, legal components. I mean, that's going to be a lot of legal exercise and a lot of legal cost at the outset to really kind of setting that infrastructure up in the proper fashion. Obviously, environmental assessments. You need to know what you have, you need to know what you can do, you need to know what the limitations are, what the risks are when you put things down on that land. You'll need to do environmental assessments as a result of that. I think ongoing stewardship is probably one that's a little less thought about, but you are going to have to, for lack of a better term, babysit this for a little bit, right? Is at, at the outset, it's going to be a lot of work without a lot of incremental immediate benefit. Again, it's an absolute win that you have this land. But from 0 to even a few years down the road, a lot of what you're going to be doing is, again, planning, legal, all the stuff that it requires, and it requires an ongoing stewardship. That doesn't end when the title and trust pathway is done. It doesn't end when the assessment comes in. There's always something, as being now a steward of this land, that you're going to have to do and have to financially understand how to pay for the things that you're going to have to be as a land steward going forward. Cultural and critical infrastructure, I like to put both together. What do we need to do? If we've decided that this is an economic opportunity land for us, and that's what we want to do with it, what infrastructure do we need to build to be both culturally sensitive, but also the critical components to making sure that if we do build this, that we can service it, and that we can, if we're putting something on here, that we have power, we have the things we need, broadband access, whatever that may be. The infrastructure component needs to absolutely be thought of as part of the economic opportunity. And then what's our capacity for future development? Again, that's an ongoing stewardship question, is what are we doing now and what do we want this to do? Again, there's going to be a lot of buildup at the outset, but even once it's built, it's like, what do we want to do next? We've got this built. We want to enhance what we're doing over a longer period of time. Maybe there's more land that we want to develop, whether it's tribal purchase again, or more federal and state, or conservation, wherever that avenue comes from. That may be something that you want to entertain down the road. It's another component of that ongoing stewardship and a cost that that land carries. So I often talk about the timeline mismatch here, is that there is costs that are associated with land back agreements, and those costs start pretty much right away. Costs arrive immediately and they continue on. Income may arrive, may never arrive, right? Again, if we're talking about using it for a purpose that's not economic in nature, which is, again, absolutely fine. It's a tribal council's decision and tribal citizens. What is the best use of this land? It may not be economic opportunity. It may be, but if income arrives, if ever, it may be years down the road here. So if you just look at this kind of chart, it's very simplistic. This is not exact by any stretch of the imagination. But again, right away, legal and trust fees, right away, environmental assessments, or pretty quickly right away, cultural infrastructure, and then your ongoing stewardship. We started that at year 1. That could actually be at year 0 as well. It could be almost immediate. There are things you're going to want to do immediately just to set things up in the proper fashion, and then there's going to be ongoing costs. So as you're doing this for economic opportunity, there may be some short-term things that you want to do, some intermediate term things you want to do, and some long-term things you want to do. But that income, as you're building those things out, may not arrive until everything is said and done, which leads a lot of costs at the beginning. And I put it here at the bottom is that, without a funded infrastructure, that gap often comes from operations. And that is a draw on your cash flow. And so if you acquire this land back and you don't have a structure and plan set up for it, a lot of times now it becomes well, we can do this, we can't do this, we can do this, we can't do this, which is picking and choosing as part of any organization and any, decision-making process and body that you're going to have. But when you're making those decisions based upon operational things that you've been trying to do for a long period of time or just in the day to day, a lot of those can get pushed and pushed and pushed out further because it isn't, because it is more of a long-term approach. And so you have to understand that there has to be some structure set up in place, or this can become a strain on your overall budget. So how do we solve that problem? Here at IndiWealth, we again recommend the tribal treasury model, sorting your capital by your time horizon. Match the structure to what the land needs and for your long-term prosperity. And so again, delineate short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. And what is your short term? Your short term is covering that legal stage, that environmental cost, the ongoing stewardship expenses. Again, similar to a budget, similar to a governmental budget, there's the day-to-day operations, and then there's the long-term capital planning. Well, the short term here is, again, it's mostly expense at this point, but you have to account for that expense. Most of this is going to be out, out, out before it comes in. So here in this situation, this isn't an area where you want to be taking a high level of risk in the market, whether it's stocks or alternatives or whatever it may be. You don't want to take a lot of risk in this short-term allocation. You want this to be highly conservative, highly liquid, but delineated for the expenses that are ongoing in that short term to get the land where you want it to go. The intermediate term side is, again, this is building out for infrastructure. This is starting that process. Okay, now we've kind of got our plan. We kind of know what we want this to do. We know what the structure kind of looks like. We know what it entails. We know what it needs. Let's start financing for that. I think because that tends to be, it can be 1 year out if you're very quick, but it can be often 3-5 years out in the horizon where you're building these things out incrementally. You can absolutely do much more of an intermediate term balanced risk approach for those kinds of things. Also, you're buffering your delays, for any delays, whether it's federal delays, whatever delays it may be, you want to have a buffer for that. And you want to have multi-year operational budgets. So again, in the short term for that ongoing stewardship, 0 to 24 months, you probably want to have in short term, highly liquid. And then you're going to have contingency plannings for 2 to 5 years, both to buffer those delays, but also to then replenish the budget that is getting wound down in that short term. And for here, you can let your money work for you a little bit more. Again, you want to be able to hedge your downside a little bit here, though. You don't want to take the full brunt of the market if the market goes down 20, 25, 30%, which can happen. And you have to have a contingency plan for this. So you want to balance your risk here rather than taking the full brunt of the market if it has some difficult times. So buffer yourself, generate some income, but have this money working for you because it isn't in that early term bucket. And because also you've already covered for your short-term allocation, you can take a little bit more risk here to have that money work for you and hopefully be able to better replenish your short-term as needed. Then on the long-term side, again, this is where you want compounding. This is the supplement and support of the land initiatives. You've got your plan, you've got the infrastructure, you know what your next 3 to 5 year plan looks like. This may be where income starts rolling in, and you can start using that income to, again, generate some greater compounding down the road. But it also may be where it's like maybe there's a tribal land purchase. Maybe there's an adjacent piece of land that you've wanted to have, but there's no federal or state, so you want to buy that. That is something, if you're looking, again, more than 5 or 7 years down the road, this is something you still want to budget for and you want to have an allocation toward it, but you want this money working for you. You want to be less sensitive here to the market fluctuations, is that you're going to accept that things are going to have difficulty during some of these periods of time. But over longer periods of time, this is how you outpace inflation. This is how you grow your asset base over an extended period, by allowing this money to work for you, by taking a little greater risk for hopefully better reward down the road. And then you can utilize those assets down the road to, again, enhance what you want to do from the existing land or add additional land if that's what you so choose. So same dollars, different jobs here. This is kind of a with and without, without a plan, and sorting capital by time horizon. So without the structure, let's kind of go through what that can happen. Is that, again, I talked about this before, but operating budgets can be strained by stewardship costs. Is that at the outset of land acquisition, there's going to be more cost than benefit. There just is in almost all situations. So understand that and budget for it and have a plan set aside that allows for that. Investment risk mismatch to time horizon. Again, when you don't know what you're going to have in short and you're just kind of blending them all together, a lot of times what I've seen in Indian country is much more risk aversion, right? Is that I don't see a ton of, we're taking excessive risk for very short periods of time. It's usually the other side. It's usually saying, well, we don't know when we're going to need this, so we're just going to leave it all in cash for now until we absolutely need it. I get it from that perspective. It feels good to saying we have it there, we have it delineated, but it's not working for you. So I think either way, as long as if you can set up the time horizon in the proper fashion, you can align the investments to match the risk that you need for those buckets. Councils are forced to pick and choose ad hoc. I talked about that before, is that this becomes, well, this is part of our operating budget. So now we need to figure out, what holes can we fill and what can we actually do versus what we can't do, because we have a lot of other competing budgets as well. So that can be a difficult time. And again, because this tends to be long in nature, especially if you're going after economic opportunity, this can be something where you can find yourself pushing and pushing and pushing because the immediate needs of other things are taking precedent over it. The result of without the structure is that land can become a source of strain rather than opportunity. And again, that's not what you want. Is that, again, the political and legal achievement of getting that land and acquisition back is phenomenal. But the financial mission, especially, again, if you're choosing economic opportunity, you don't want this thing to be a strain on the other things you're trying to do for your nation. So what's the model, the time horizon model? What are the benefits of that? I think each time horizon is understood and budgeted. I talked about that before, is that we know where our short, intermediate term, and long term. We've budgeted for it, we've delineated for it, and now we have assets that fit that approach. And that's what I talk about when I say investment risk fits the timeline of need, is really you're setting yourself up so that you're not taking massive amounts of risk for money you need in 6 months, but you're also not sitting in cash for money you don't need for 10 years. So you've aligned it in the proper fashion to allow you to do what you want to do with this land. And now councils can focus on the stewardship. You've already delineated for this. You've communicated to your citizens that this is what we're doing with this pool of resources. This is why this is going to work over the next 5 to 7 years. This is our plan of attack. And this is why it's going to work for future generations as well, because we're compounding this growth over a longer period of time. It's a phenomenal way to go to your citizens rather than saying, well, we're taking something from this because we need to do that. That's a harder argument. It's a much more difficult circumstance, and it leads to a lot of delays in the land prosperity argument. A result of a time horizon-based model, I think, is that the land can create generational benefit. Again, it's not immediate. In a lot of these situations, it's not going to be an immediate benefit. And there needs to be a lot of thought and conversation about what you want to do with that land and really kind of set up the plan and structure in the proper fashion. There are a lot of people that can help you out there with that. Once you hit a financial mission, when you've got that delineated, when you kind of know what your goals are, this is where we at IndiWealth would be able to establish and help you figure out how to align those investments with the mission that you've set forth. So in that regard, again, this fits very well into our Treasury playbook for tribal nations, which focuses on time horizon as the primary component of how you set up an infrastructure for long-term tribal prosperity. If you want a copy, I'll keep one in the link below. Please feel free to reach out to me as well, and I'll send you a copy. So that's all we have for this week. I hope that was helpful. Tune in next week where we'll have our next hot button tribal topic. But until then, thank you very much. Take care of yourselves.